At present, the acquisition of U.S. steel by Nippon Steel has been halted by Biden, and people are paying attention to what will happen next. In this context, the reason why Nippon Steel is attempting to acquire U.S. steel is not unrelated to the current state of affairs in China. Therefore, this discussion focuses on the current state of China and how it is impacting the world. To begin with, to put it briefly, China is currently facing significant difficulties. I will introduce the specifics later, but China is struggling so much that it is resorting to a price-cutting strategy to sell abroad as much as possible. However, on the other hand, there is a strange phenomenon. China is importing steel, primarily from Japan and other countries, even though it is overproducing and has a surplus domestically. Simply put, China imports high-quality steel products from abroad while producing and exporting lower-quality, cheaper steel products domestically. This means that China is exporting large quantities of cheap and low-quality products worldwide. Steel products do not necessarily need to be of high quality depending on their use. For some applications, Chinese products, which are cheaper but lower in quality, suffice. There is global demand for affordable products that don't require excessive quality. Consequently, China is capturing such markets. However, if left unchecked, countries producing their own steel face significant challenges. The influx of cheap Chinese steel could devastate their industries. Therefore, many countries are implementing protective measures, such as tariffs, to safeguard their domestic industries. For instance, during the Biden administration, the U.S. tripled tariffs on steel products. We have previously created a video about this. If you are interested, you can view it via the link in the video description. As a result, selling products in the U.S. now incurs significant tariffs, a trend expected to intensify. The U.S. dollar is currently very strong, making imports relatively cheap. However, promoting imports at the cost of domestic industry decline is unacceptable, so the U.S. is imposing tariffs to block deflationary exports and protect its domestic industries. This trend is likely to continue for the foreseeable future. To digress a bit, recent developments indicate that Japan's automobile industry is also undergoing a reorganization. This, too, is deeply tied to U.S. protectionist policies. Until recently, automakers could build factories in Mexico and export to the U.S. Even American automakers like GM and Ford have factories in Mexico. European automakers such as Volkswagen and BMW, as well as Japanese companies like Honda, Nissan, and Mazda, have also established plants in Mexico. However, under the Trump administration, tariffs were imposed on imports from Mexico, arguing that allowing this would result in job losses within the U.S. This created a crisis for manufacturers that had invested heavily in Mexican facilities. As a result, conducting business in the U.S. now requires local production. Selling to the U.S. from abroad risks tariffs regardless of origin. This has particularly impacted Chinese companies, which, facing tariffs on exports from China, have moved to places like Mexico or Southeast Asia, claiming the products are made in Vietnam or Mexico to avoid scrutiny. However, such strategies often lack restraint, leading the U.S. to counter with stricter measures. This has forced companies like Nippon Steel to consider acquiring American companies to establish domestic production and bypass such barriers. This move, however, has ignited nationalist sentiments in the U.S., leading to political opposition to the acquisition. While this issue pertains primarily to the steel industry, similar dynamics are evident in the automobile sector. In essence, China is engaging in massive deflationary exports that threaten to decimate domestic industries in countries like the U.S., prompting protectionist measures such as tariffs or new quality standards to limit imports. Returning to the core topic, China is currently experiencing severe competition and economic challenges within its steel industry. Last January, for example, 31 companies in China's steel industry declared bankruptcy simultaneously. This group, based in Yunnan province, was involved in everything from iron ore mining to steel production, with an annual production capacity of 2.1 million tons. For comparison, Nippon Steel's annual production is around 45 million tons. Despite being a much smaller group, its bankruptcy highlights broader issues within China's steel industry. This company had been struggling for over a decade due to domestic oversupply. Although China was undergoing a construction boom, the steel industry was already facing harsh conditions by 2014, with production halted and efforts to seek investors proving unsuccessful. Consequently, in January last year, the entire group declared bankruptcy. This is merely one example of the widespread challenges facing China's steel industry. In the third quarter of 2024, the profits of major Chinese steel companies fell by 56.3% compared to the previous year. Many companies, including listed firms, reported significant losses, with 18 out of 30 experiencing deficits. Additionally, last summer, the world's second largest stainless steel manufacturer and its 27 affiliated companies also declared bankruptcy. This group, known as TISCO in Japanese, specialized in nickel and stainless steel. Interestingly, 3 subsidiaries survived because they were acquired by a state-owned enterprise. However, the situation remains unresolved as suppliers to these subsidiaries are struggling to recover unpaid debts, sometimes amounting to billions of yuan. Such bankruptcies are not isolated incidents, they have cascading effects, impacting the entire supply chain and regional economies. The root cause often lies in China's cutthroat competition, which drives prices down, leaving companies unable to generate sufficient profits. China's current strategy is to rely on exports to sustain itself. However, importing countries are implementing protective measures, further limiting China's ability to sell its products freely. While China may find some markets without domestic steel production, it faces significant barriers in major markets like Japan, the U.S., and Europe. In conclusion, China's steel industry is struggling due to intense domestic competition and economic challenges. Although the country has adopted a low-cost export strategy, countries like the U.S. are countering with tariffs and protective measures, creating a difficult environment for Chinese exports. Japanese companies, caught in the crossfire, are also finding it harder to export to the U.S., necessitating local production. Nippon Steel's attempt to acquire U.S. Steel is a strategic move to adapt to this new reality, but political opposition may derail it. That's all for this discussion. See you in the next video.